Well, we haven't done a book review in a while, and so it's high time for one. Now, our pastor did interview Eric Metaxas. He, as many of you know, many of you've seen and heard Eric Metaxas on many a program on CSN or BCY America, and he has written many books and he's been on Family Talk with Dr. Dobson, and he has a book that Jack Hibbs recommended to everybody. It's called Letter to the American Church, Eric Metaxas. And I like what Lutzer says at the beginning cover of the book. Says this book is like a bucket of cold water thrown into the face of a sleeping church. Boy, that sounds like Jesus addressing the 7 churches in Revelation, Laodicea. You know, Beck has some comments from famous people, but I think I'm only going to look at like the last couple here. Like I like this one. It says bold and insightful. Metaxas calls for pastors and other Christian leaders who will be courageous enough to speak unambiguously against the massive anti-Christian forces that now force and threaten permanent transformation of the American society, and to bring an end to America's rule as the beacon of freedom for the world. That was Wayne Grudem, and he was a research professor of theology at Phoenix Seminary. It's the same seminary where our beloved Pastor Daryl Delahousie is president of. And the intro is very good too on the side sleeves, and I'm going to read some of the chapters. There are 16 chapters. What is the church? Does God ask us to see into the future? You know, if you see your neighbor's house on fire, may be the future if you it may not be a future if you don't get to him to save him and get the hose out. It might save his house. So I would think, if it's right in front of me, you need to do something. And unless you repent, well, we know about that from 2 Chronicles 7:14. The church and the Jewish question. Now, my father was in World War II, and he showed pictures of the concentration camps, and he showed pictures of the pits that they dug after they burned the Jewish people. 6 million people in the Holocaust burned in ovens. Unthinkable. And the German people lived a rich and lavish life and thought this was unthinkable before Hitler came to power. And yet, all of a sudden, just like we woke up in America when number 46 was announced, we kind of thought, how in the world did that happen? Kind of like what they thought when 45 was announced and Hillary thought she had it in the bank. Well, these guys have been at it for a long time. And every time, Marxism fails. But the question was, will 12,000 pastors in a country stay silent? And the spiral of silence, if they're silent, it's almost like they're brought to the slaughter and they become martyrs, and then one error paralyzes another error, and then you got the Hitler saying, preach the gospel, der Führer, that he's the leader, and the gospel is the German Nazi doctrine. And that was, again, unthinkable for people who were a Christian nation and just stood by and let it happen. Nobody stood up to speak the truth in love. And most of all, we always think, well, we can't separate, we got to separate politics and the church. No, sometimes you're called to stand up and do something. Why do you think that God calls these people ministers that serve the government ministers to serve the public? Because they are supposed to be ministers, but the church has never really kind of been asleep at the wheel and hasn't reminded them of that obligation. So the question comes down to, who do you say God is? The parable of the talents, justifying ourselves, which we're really good at, and a religion-less Christianity, kind of like the lawless pushing for the church today of that one world government and that one world religion. We're not far. It's all happening. But Metaxas tells us in the sleeves here that silence is the face of evil, and itself is evil. Silence in the face of evil is evil itself. Not to speak is to speak, because you voted by not speaking. That's a no. Not to act is to act. God will not hold us guiltless. Can it really be God's will that his children be silent at a time like this? Decrying the cowardice that masquerades the godly meekness, Metaxas summons the church to battle. And the author of the best-selling book of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Metaxas reveals the haunting similarities between American church and the German church in the 1930s. Echoing the German martyr's prophetic call, he exhorts his fellow Christians to repent of their silence in the face of evil, and he accentuated an unbiblical faith based on what Bonhoeffer called cheap grace, and it has sapped the spiritual vitality of millions of Americans. Paying lip service to insipid evangelism, they shrink from the combating evils of our time. Metaxas refutes the pernicious lie that fighting evil politicizes Christianity. It does not. Truth is truth. People will either accept it or they'll reject it. As Bonhoeffer and the other heroes of faith insisted, the church has an irreplaceable role in the culture of a nation. It is a duty to fight the powers of darkness, especially on behalf of the weak and the vulnerable. Silence is not an option. God calls us to defend the unborn. 65 million aborted since Roe and Wade 1973. Just think of your Social Security and all the taxes. A lot of things could have been avoided had the guys in charge thought. Homer Simpsons, all of them. To confront the lies of the cultural Marxism and to battle the globalist tyranny that crushes human freedom. Confident that this is his fight, the church must overcome fear and enter the fray armed with the spiritual weapons of prayer, self-sacrifice, and love. We look at what happened to America, what happened to the good old days. Well, the good old days may be long past us if we don't wake up, and it looks like it's way past us because we haven't really stood up as the plans of the evil has pretty much gone along doing what it chooses to do. So it is an earnest wake-up call. Bonhoeffer was a pastor, a martyr, and a prophet, and a spy, and he warns of the haunting similarities, like we said, of what happened in Germany. And it's very unfortunate, very, very unfortunate. Silence is not an option. And may your pastor be bold and speak the truth in love. A lot better to speak the truth in love than let people go to hell and die a needless death. But martyrdom and persecution is coming if we continue to be weak in the face of testing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Have a wonderful day. I hope you get the book, because it is a book that every pastor and really leader should have. Changing America while we still can.